everyone. Welcome to the Founders Foyer with me, Aishwarya. This foyer is full of conversations, the place where creators, founders, and builders can look for all the concepts and inspiration to grow their ideas into products. Building and shipping impactful products is definitely the enjoyable part of every product manager's journey. It's even fun to think about what problems to work on, putting on the founder's mindset from time to then. And then we also work with fellow co founders on the team. Of course, there are so many challenges. And as somebody who does this on my day job, I can't agree enough. So, why don't we bring a peer along and chat about all things building products, navigating ideas, and understanding this PM journey? Joining me today is Shyvee Shi, product manager at LinkedIn. She's also co-founded the PM Learning Series, wherein she chats with leaders across the globe to share insights for leveling up product career. She's a passionate creator and she just also launched a course on productivity for product managers. Hey Shivi, thank you so much for being here on the Founders Foyer.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor to be here.
Awesome. So, let's start with your journey into product. How was your entry and what brought you here and how has this journey been so long for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I would say I'm not the lucky ones who get into product as their first job for an undergrad, right? I'm more like, I guess, majority of product managers in the world where I stumble across product as a career. So I started my journey working in actually investment banking as a summer intern. Realized that it takes a certain personality to succeed in finance, such as like being really greedy for money, like you just really good at understanding the money mechanism. And I studied finance actually back in my undergrad, but I realized that I want to use my skill set in a more comprehensive manner. And I love consulting or understanding the business strategy and every components of it. So I decided to go into consulting. I'm working mostly in the IT transformation and digital strategy space. So I serve over, I would say, 6 clients over the course of like 3 to 4 years. And that gives me a lot of just like variety of works, in operational digital strategy, IT transformation capacity. And then I went to business school to sort of explore what comes next. And I discovered that, being able to map out customer journey and working on digital projects was very excited. At the time, I did loosely consider about product management, but I think 2 mistakes that I made, I think a lot of early, career professionals would probably make. One was that I didn't have a computer science degree. So I talked to myself thinking that, hey, maybe I won't be a good fit for product because, what if I can work effectively with engineers? So I kind of like, I guess the imposter syndrome makes me question my choice. And then the second thing was I also didn't do enough coffee chat at the time. So I kind of have this like preconceived notion of what product managers do. And I talked to a few of them. They told me like they designed this button in this flow. And I was like, wow, back in strategy days, I can map out the entire, user journey. So I was like, maybe I am better off, creating PowerPoints, which I was really, really good at. So that's when I actually talked myself down for the first time to pursue a career in product. So I went back to consulting, did that for a few more years. And I start to realize, man, I really, really drawn to being hands-on, solving problem, talking to users. At that point, I get a lot more confidence working with engineers. So that was back in 2018, 2027, actually, 2017. And what happened was I started interviewing for product positions, but nobody wanted me for a product position because they're like, what have you shipped? You are a consultant and MBA's like made it worse, right? You're just like talk. Have you ever walked your talk, right? So I had a little bit of an identity crisis, I would say, at that point, because I thought, man, I thought I had the product position and now nobody wants me as a product manager. So after a lot of reflection, sort of, networking and help, figuring out where can I uniquely position myself, I eventually landed a role at LinkedIn to help our sales reps building out internal sales tools. So think of it as like almost like an internal consultant trying to champion digital transformation using technology. So it is played to my strength, and the team understand the value a consultant brings, right? So they embrace that. And then that's my, I guess, like entry to tech. And through that role, I got opportunities to work with engineers and designers on my team over the course of 2 years through just countless, networking and, talking to people. I finally transitioned internally into our LinkedIn Learning product team and have really, really enjoyed the work since.
Wow, that's like a connecting so many dots. And what I really enjoyed about this story is how you sort of embrace, like you mentioned, you sort of understood, okay, this is where I am, this is where I want to go, and these are some of the mistakes I made. And reflecting back, I think these two mistakes are something very, very common. A lot of us do make. We talk ourselves out of stepping up and taking that first action when it comes to wanting to be a product manager, or at least understanding why our interests go towards the product lane. And two, definitely is we often have the fear of networking, which you rightly pointed out. Is we don't often talk to folks around us. We have assumptions and we sort of clarify them ourselves and say, okay, yeah, I don't think I'm just going to go and do this. So thanks a lot for bringing those. And I'm glad that you finally found an entry into the product space, because we have so many amazing things to talk about it. So let's probably go one by one. Yeah, I think the other thing that I'm very curious about is how you've had launching your career yourself, right? Like working through different domains like strategy followed by consulting, where again you get to work with clients, but it's definitely much different from working with customers day in day out and working with engineering and design teams as on the product side. So do you see anything special that's helped you shape your career apart from the peaceful factor here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really like a saying that Steve Jobs usually said, you only connect the dots when you look backwards, not forwards. So a lot of the career that comes to this point made me feel like, okay, what kind of product manager, or more broadly, what kind of professionals or person that those experiences have shaped me? I think a couple of things. First, being in a client service industry like consulting or even investment banking, we're constantly working with like what we call client, which is different from like an end user or customer in the sense of an enterprise, like a product, maybe more like like a buyer in a B2B products, right? I think what you learn is that you learn to manage the stakeholder really well, right? Like you try to hear their requests, but then learn how to smartly challenge them, because at the end of the day, they're the one who's paying the checks. So how do you manage them? So communicate, very concise communication, bringing, I would always say that my superpower is bringing clarity to chaos. So through very clear communicate comms and through, breaking down the problem. And I think, so stakeholder management is one, communication is another one. I think another strength that consulting have really taught me is really using number-driven approach and being very analytical. And that's also part of the reason how I can bring clarity to chaos. And one thing that I learned, again, coming back to, I told you I was really proud of that, my ability to make amazing slides, which is visualization. So when a concept is very complex, I am a big visual learner. So how do I break down complex components and like really simplify it? I think that is really powerful, especially when you're talking with, say, engineers or sometimes even designers, right? There's only so much English can do when you try to explain your concept.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of us might have seen that memes of like, this is what product manager described the feature, and then what engineer and then eventually what the client get, and like how much disconnect that there is. So I think visual thinking is definitely another thing that brought to me. And then because of the variety of all the consulting engagement, I think I had to be like a super fast learner, always embrace, sort of open mindset, like to learn and to challenge your assumption. I think that's also a good trait for product managers who try to build empathy, and, you're always trying to absorb different market information. So I think those are some of the key traits that have helped me. It's definitely been like, a journey that you try to explore where you like, right? Sometimes you never know until you try it. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Totally with you on this because it's a fun ride. Like you said, it's connecting dots backwards when you look back and think, oh, I've been able to work on these, and this is how it's helped me shape the pattern for different learning inputs that I have. And often people just say, these are like soft skills, but I'm this person who really believes that it takes those so-called soft skills to become the best product manager, like to understand the art behind how to work with people, because a lot of this is working with people, like you said, working with different sets of people. It's either customers or it's internal teams where you work with fellow designers, fellow engineers, and I loved when you said words can only take you, to a certain extent, because often what we think is not how we translate. Rather, like I think we think we translate it well, but often there's like a whole total bridge that can come in between what we think and what gets conveyed. So I'm curious. You mentioned about visual thinking, because I'm a huge believer of breaking things down visually, and as much as possible, people call it as PRDs. I would even say let's not call them docs or PRDs. Let's just go get visual, get down to stuff, do something visually, and then show it to your designers and engineers. So curious on the visual part. Do you like use any tools? What's your go-to technique when it comes to, let's say, breaking things down visually?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first advice is always start with just the basics, right? Paper and pen. So I like to just use white paper and scratch things out. One thing I learned that helps spikes the creativity is to go to a place that you don't normally go. So not your normal work desk. Go to like a cafe or somewhere, and then just give yourself like 20 to 30 minutes to like kind of just pour down everything you have, like whether it's words, don't worry about the visual aspect, but once you put like the different thoughts out, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can visualize it this way, maybe I can do it that way. So that's my first step. And then when it comes to tools, I like to use Miro. I know a lot of folks use either Figma, Gen, but I started with Miro and it's super simple. You can take a lot of screenshot, highlight stuff. So I just start using that. And then we do a lot of team brainstorming on Miro, or I share concept on Miro as well. So usually I think what I do is that I take screenshots of like apps that I study and highlight, oh, I like this feature, I like that. And then I would be thinking about, well, what is the intent of that feature, right? What are they trying to do? Does that match what I'm trying to do for my product? And then sometimes when it comes to, engineering situation, it's really ally and thinking through what are the edge cases and what's the mainstream, right? It's helping the team shaping out like, oh, how do I organize my thoughts? So like figure out all this different situation. How do they interact with each other? So it's much more like a system thinking of like, here's all the different components and how they interact. It's very much a work in progress, right? Like you want people's feedback, challenge how you see things. But yeah, visual thinking has always helped me. And I always start just the most basic part, just paper and pencil and paper. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it sounds like not just obsessed about structure or obsessed about finesse at the starting, but like you said, get back to the basics, so paper pen, and start with the problem at hand, and then, like you said, go about finding a way to connect the dots. So that makes sense. So we discussed a lot around your recent role at LinkedIn Learning, and also around the PM stuff. So let's go, one by one. Let's first start to talk about the LinkedIn Learning, because you're helping so many people learn and master new skills by working on a product that helps them. So what's challenging about working on something that is so much career based, and it's so ever changing, right? This concept of ed tech, this whole vertical is so dynamic. So what's the challenging part about working in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's funny because I think depending on, so I work on an enterprise education space, right? So if you talk about, I think K through 12, the challenge might be slightly different, but most of them are applicable, I think, to both space. So in the adult learning space, I think first, the job to be done, like you said, is way more complex than a a more commodity product, like for example, Uber or Insta, you can endless optimize every friction in that flow and map out the customer journey and just like keep optimizing in every circumstances, pick you up on the airport. How do we select where you want to pick up? Like no cash free transaction and all of that stuff, right? But for learning or career development, first you have to motivate people to learn. Learning is actually hard, right? For a lot of people. It can be boring. It requires dedication. It requires a lot of motivation. So that's really hard to do. And then learning is just part of it. It does not translate directly to like, oh, you're going to get a job or you're going to get a good grade, you're going to get promoted. So it could be a long journey. And so from the action to the outcome, just like you go to workout, right? Like it's almost like a lifetime pursuit, whether you like it or not, right? Like you can't say
it's very internally driven as well.
Yeah, you're going to build that pack overnight. That's not going to happen, right? So a job to be done is way more complex than if you just take a ride and feel delightful right away, right? So I think that is both challenging and exciting because there's a lot of user psychology you could use, gamification potentially, and yeah, just that's an interesting space, but also super challenging. That's one. I think the second space is that there's a lot of players in the space, meaning not so much of the competition, that too, but more like the number of users that you're serving, right? The stakeholders that you need to deal with. So in the enterprise space, you have people who are the employees who are taking the learning lesson. You have the manager who might be curious to learn about their team's overall, learning and development. You have the buyers who's actually paying to buy the software or the license. So you have like three different people, all probably have different, views or goals for themselves. So there could be conflicts there. And who do you listen to? How do you balance? And then, similarly, if it's in a school environment for K through 12, you can think of school administrator might have certain requirement that comes from, the government. And then you have parents, teacher, the children themselves, maybe use software. So there's a lot of things that you need to make trade-off decisions and prioritization, and then without overcomplicating the product. Last but not least, I would say, as much as we like to build a product, content is part of the product experience as well. Just like when you watch Netflix, no matter how good Netflix recommend you stuff, if the show itself is not great, then you probably won't find a lot of enjoyment from using the product, right? So I think what's unique about being an ad tech is how it's not content is part of the product experience, and then so you need to think through what kind of content we want to deliver. Especially in the past few years, I think there has been a lot of change in the content space, right? From more deep learning to like more hands-on, doing a lot of like practice coding in a sandbox environment, for example. Or if you want to learn data analytics, you need to, actually open Excel or Tableau and actually learn how to practice, with groups. And then also a lot of things have gone into TikTok style, right? Bite-sized learning. Introducing entertainment part of learning. So a lot of that, a lot of changes. And how do you maintain your brand, right? Like, do you focus on one type or do you diversify? Where do you go? Where do you draw the balance? Which one do you go after first that will have the biggest leverage? So there's a lot of interesting and challenging questions that, one can ask in this space.
Yeah, definitely. I think whatever you mentioned, as much as they're challenging, each of those sounds super exciting because there's like a whole path that we can go down each of those questions. Especially to me, I think when I kept hearing this, this space is very commitment oriented, right? Because like you said, you work with enterprise companies, and this product functions a lot around how much committed people are when it comes to learning every day and putting their efforts into learning. And it's a space that's not very definitive. Like you said, it's going to be a lot of hazy, ends everywhere. And how as PMs you connect the pictures together and how they as users on their end are able to receive it again is very different. So that by itself sounds super exciting to me, as you kept mentioning, like so much to solve for. And I think you brought in a very important point, which is a lot around the target personas. For a lot of these B2B products, personas are like you have a bunch of them. You could target like administrators who end up paying for it, whereas they don't know any intricacies about the product. It's the like folks on the teams who will be using this product. So it's like you have to cater the product to them to know how to use it, whereas the payment stuff should go to another persona that ends up paying you for the product. So that sounds like another interesting like challenge to solve for.
Definitely a lot of challenge. And people, like you said, level of commitment could change, right? Let's say today we have a tough economic environment. A lot of people might get laid off. Then their motivation to learn is very strong because they need a job pretty soon and need to demonstrate that they have those skills. So you're looking at a timeline of 3 to 6 months, right? People might be looking for a job. But once you get a job, for example, maybe the first months you're very motivated to learn because you wanted to get like first 90 day, give some quick wins. But after that, then it sort of transitioned from this like painkiller product to more like a vitamin candy, nice to have, products, right? Like people are like, I knew I need to learn, but how many times that you actually learn, or maybe you started the journey and then you couldn't motivate yourself enough to complete because there's so much going on in life. Needs prioritization.
Yeah, for sure. And learning is getting super collaborative. TikTok videos was one of the great examples that you brought with, where learning is very peer driven as well, like understanding what my friends are doing. And it's like, hey, I think, I saw this at their place and it looks super interesting. Let me also learn the skill. And the attention span is definitely less as, like when compared to learning something as a whole module versus breaking it down. And with a lot of gamification, I think I can truly bring Duolingo comes to me as an example in mind when thinking about how to gamify the whole learning process. So I think, the space as a whole is definitely explorative and so much potential to solve for as being PMs on the space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So now, going over to one of the other important questions about product management that I wanted to ask you, which is many early stage builders and founders themselves start as PMs, where they start thinking about the problems to solve, and like we were just discussing about the different paths to explore, and then see which one would be more profitable at the time being, and then solve for it and shift things. From your experiences, what would you call as the first 3 things, let's say, somebody should focus on as they just start this PM journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially as founders in early startups, the first thing that you should figure out is absolutely product market fit, right? I know a lot of people talk about that, but what I really mean by that, I think, are 2 aspects. One is, how do you frame your product problems space? I think a lot of us tend to be very overly narrowly thinking about the problem that we're solving, and we're almost fell in love with the solution, so that we think about validating it, think about driving growth to that solution without really validating, is the problem we're solving, like, is it big enough a space that you as the company can uniquely position to solve it? And what solution you can. And so I think figuring out that is absolutely number 1 priority. And there's a lot of literature written about how do you measure it, how do you figure it out. I think the Lean Product Playbook is one good resource to find that. And I would say one example that stuck with me quite a bit recently was, so when the importance of framing problems space, right? So think about Disney a couple of years ago, what would be the complaint during like summer seasons? It would be the wait time for a ride is way too long. Right? If that's how you frame the problem, then what is going to be your immediate solution? You're going to want to create more rides, increase the capacity of the park, build more park. And guess what the result ends be? Like, you're going to spend a lot of money buying a lot of things. And when it comes to winter or whatnot, the other times when there's like down season, you're going to have a lot of empty space, right? Like, utilization is going to go down. So what they did instead is reframe the question from like the wait time is too long to the wait time is too annoying. So how can I make the wait time less annoying? So then they create things like parades, maybe build
Yeah.
more food stands. So that, yes, you still have to wait 2 to 3 hours for some popular rides. But hey, in the meantime, you have some other stuff to do that kind of distracted your attention, right? The fast pass and things like that. So it opens up the space for a lot more solution. So
Mm.
that's, I think, one great example to kind of illustrate the point of like, hey,
Yeah.
you should think about, what exactly is the right problem to solve and frame it in such way that opens up non-obvious solution, and make it, broader and with more opportunity and rooms to solve and to grow. So that's number one, how you frame like, the problem space and find product market fit. I think the other things that, founders need to do is just being able to get really close to your user and be open-minded. I think it's all related to finding product market fit as well. But how can you, I guess, like flex your communication skills as you pitch your idea? When you talk to an investor, it's going to be different from when you talk to an end user. How can you, learn how to do that and like keep an open mindset? You also have to be pretty well-rounded, right? Like when you talk to an investor to get funding, it's going to be a different pitch. You need to understand the VC sort of environment versus how you actually interview a user and not, try to, ask leading questions. So having a well-rounded skill set and being open-minded. I think being curious and open-minded is the first step to be able to learn so many things so quickly. Last but not least, I think is this notion of like, how do you find leverage? I think earlier in my career, I tend to like focus on the execution. Oh, when I have an idea, I would immediately jump onto like, okay, how do I do it? How do I execute? Here, especially in the startup environment, I think there's a lot of trade-off you need to make. And I would strongly encourage people to think about, how can you think smartly such that you validate whether your idea is good or not in the shortest period of time, and then embrace this kind of optimizing ROI, while balancing like long-term, short-term thinking. So what are the quickest things you can try to validate your assumption, right? What are the things that you can build that will give you the highest leverage, the biggest return, versus just anything you can do? So a sense of prioritization, I think, is auto, but not just prioritizing, but also with
de-risking the whole situation.
Yes, like how can I validate that it's working in the fastest path, right?
Yeah. No, I think that sounds great. So reframing the question spot on a Disney example. Another example that comes to my mind is the lift one, where they say if there are more people waiting for taking the elevator, like do you build more elevators or do you put a mirror right there? So people don't find the wait time annoying. So I think reframing the question is such an important point, because most often as PMs, I've done this mistake as well, where we often jump into solutions. We're like, hey, I think I know what this problem is, so let me just go into solutioning. But often when we think about it, it wouldn't have been the right problem in the first place. So that's such a solid point to think about. And I think over to the de-risking point as well that you mentioned. How do I know something of this is worth to work on in the less time that I have in hand? So both of these I think really make sense. And thanks for mentioning it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So now I think we've discussed a lot around the PM aspects of it. So over to the creator side of Shyvee. So let's start talking about your the PM learning series. Where you talk to a lot of people on your series, like a lot of founders, a lot of product leaders, especially. So from those experiences, what do you want to tell people about it? Like, what's something that you've picked up by running the series?
Yeah, definitely. I think I really enjoy the series, to be honest. I definitely want to continue to do it as much as I can. I think it's a part is what I'm passionate about, spreading knowledge and using this kind of interview format to bring it out. And I love our live series where I can involve audience as well. People can ask question. I can try to feature their comments. So I really enjoy that. I think to me, some of the things that I really like was first just learning from the best minds, right? So each episode had
So
like
true.
slightly different focus. And then someone's like people are known for different things, right? Like Sachin is very much really good at 0 to 1 products. So let's ask him about how he defined that and drive strategy around it. Neriel is very good in understanding how to build habits, forming product, as well as how to be focused, right? Like avoid distraction. So then a lot of those are very critical to both PM, actually people who work closely with PM. So I like to think of it more like I'm learning from all these masterminds, and I like to like condense it and bring it into a newsletter. And I was really grateful for people who are willing to reach out and help me to write some of those newsletters as part of their learning journey as well. So I love to build sort of a community around it. I think there's definitely more room to continue to grow that series and like involve the community. I think some top learnings. One is just talk like I guess like how do you? A lot of people ask me how do you start it, right? Like how do you get the show going? I think there are a couple things, couple techniques. I guess one is you can start small. So before I launched the PM Learning Series, actually back in March, so I launched it at the end of May this year. Back in March, we started a smaller series called the Career Chats. And I reached out to some of the creators that I know, or directly leaders within LinkedIn, right? The company. So people that I feel more comfortable talking to. So I started there to see, hey, will I be a good host? Will I be comfortable in front of camera and, asking questions? Will I feel nervous or natural talking to a leader? Could be miles ahead of like leagues ahead of me, right? In terms of title and seniority.
Yeah.
And so that was one practice, right? You start small and then you build up your confidence to eventually, working for more leaders. So that's, number one for anyone who is thinking about, hey, I want to try something like that. I think just try it with like almost like a peer leader or like slightly higher that you're comfortable talking to, and then just see if you like that. And then there's multiple. Second thing I would say, there's different type of formats too, right? There's the recording type of podcast where you don't involve live audience. I like to do the live audience one because I feel like I can engage the community. There's audio events, right, on Clubhouse. Recently, LinkedIn launched audio events. So it's different vibe altogether. So you can like test and practice and see which, always start small to gain some experience. I think last but not least is when you're ready to launch. The lessons I learned was because I work in like AI machine learning for my product, on LinkedIn Learning. So in any type of algorithm, you always have a co-star problem. Meaning when you first start out, nobody knows about you. Or if you search for something, let's say we have new content, how do we know if that new content is good, right? So you have a co-star problem, right? Like, and it's the chicken and egg. Like, hey, if you're new, like nobody knows about you, then why should people trust you? So the way how I overcame it is to get like an exec sponsor, let's say for the show back within the company, such that I could tap into that person's network to find, prominent guests that would potentially elevate the show. So I think that was the secret, I guess, not so much secret anymore, to be able to identify like good guests, even when you are only starting to have the show, right? So, but once you have, let's say the first set of guests, they're really strong, then it's much easier for you to ask a variety of people to join. But I do wanted to shape the show such that, it's not just all top leaders, but also bringing everyday creators who have an interesting perspective to share. So I think once you figure out and overcome the fear of hosting a show, then the next question you should ask yourself is, what kind of show, like what kind of vibe you want to create, right? For me is to maximize the learning value, from a particular leader. So I do tend to focus on areas that they're very strong at, coupled with a little bit of career lesson and career chat, and resources that we can share. Obviously 30 minutes is actually a really short time, but again, people are very limited attention span. So we learned that the secret is to have 30 minutes and potentially overrun it a little bit if needed. And then so I'm continuing to iterate as well, like what kind of question I ask, how do I want to engage with the audience, And yeah, so those are some of the questions. Once you start, you'll start to ask. You're like
Awesome.
the product manager of your show, right? I think it's known as like a producer, right? The producer of the show.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, I think totally relatable because these are some of the things that I do on the Founders Foyer as well. So, like you said, it's so much learning each day. Trying to start small, trying to understand. Like first of all, let go of the fear of even being on the video. Like let go of the fact that you're just starting only now, taking baby steps, but trying to like have somebody to support you, like a peer group to talk it out and try and understand how best you navigate. I think those are like very, very actionable steps that you mentioned. And I'm glad that the listeners listening to this today would also like creators who are thinking about working on their projects would take more inspiration from this. So, I would tie in what you said with the other point that you made for the previous question, which is knowing what kind of things to talk to different stakeholders. I think for you, talking to different creators, these product leaders from across, it gives you that tone, the language, and sort of understand what should you ask each person when it comes to very specific experiences, very specific things that they're good at, and that I think would tie in with framing great questions for you, which is going to differ for each person on the show, right? So I think I would connect that with what you just said now as for this point of view.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing lots of research too, like listening to their past interviews. A lot of those would probably have spoken somewhere. And then just study their LinkedIn profile, thinking through based on their experience as a learner, what would I most want to learn, right?
Yeah, totally. So now that we're talking about a lot of your creative pursuits, one of the other things that I want to ask you is when it comes to personal frameworks or methods about managing your time, because I know you write about product management on LinkedIn every day. You conduct these live events with people, and you also have a day-to-day PM job. And how do you draw like a line and say, like I have time for this over here, and I can also like manage a lot of my other personal stuff over here. What's your productivity method like?
Yeah, there's so many actually. Let me just do down to like the top, I guess 3 or 5. First, always start with setting your intention, right? I don't do everything actually. I'm most active on LinkedIn, but I probably should have a presence on Twitter. It's a matter of copy and pasting my content there or uploading my videos onto YouTube, but I haven't done that. So that means I'm not perfect either. I'm not getting everything done that I want. So by setting your intention of like, what is your big rocks of the day? It's very important. In my course, I had this like visual, again, giving back to visual thinking, right? You have 2 mason jars where if you put a lot of sands first, into your mason jar, let's say those are the little things that you need to do. And then you don't have room to actually pick the big rocks or the pebbles who are a little bigger than the sands. But if you prioritize putting your big rocks and the pebbles first, then the little sands will find their way through the maple jar. And so the analogy here, I think, is that if you focus on the big rocks, even if some people say, hey, I need to get some small things done first before I can amp up my motivation for the day, that works too. But my point is, you always know, okay, here are the 3 things I need to complete for today, and be very clear about it. Anything, if you can complete beyond that, that's great. So that's number 1 is like, intention setting. I think at a daily level, I do weekly and stuff like that too. And then the second thing I would say is in the moment intention resets. That's very important too, because sometimes when there's a lot of things going on, your to-do list is like kind of like messy. I tend to do 2 things. One is just write everything down, right? In your to-do list, have this like, I call it an inbox where you just, everything you need to do, but so that it's off your mind, you will prioritize eventually where that task goes to, right? But having this peace of mind of like, I'm not going to forget it, but I'm not going to also do it either. So, but I have that list. So having this permanent home, this repository of things that you need to think about, and then you can prioritize it over time. Some of them might seem very urgent, very important at the time. And then after you noodle on it, marinate it for like a couple of hours, it might be like, wait a second. Again, back to that under number 3 things, right? Is that the right prioritization? Is it going to get me the right leverage? Is the ROI big enough for me to actually do it? If not, then just ruthlessly eliminate, right? So, and the other thing I do is in the moment when things get crazy, I just kind of pause for like 3 minutes, do a deep dive, debrief, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. And I kind of repeated that 4 times. I call it the 4X method, because that really helps me to like just like calm down and like figure out, okay, where am I? What do I need to do next? How can I channel my energy? And then a couple other things are like, sometimes you can hack your motivation, which is, let's say you don't feel like you're very motivated to do something, then maybe, but you really need to do something. Maybe you just tell yourself to do it for 2 minutes, set a timer. And then once you get going, even literally for like a minute and a half, you're like, man, I just like, you're so grumpy about this task. But eventually, when you do it for 2 or 5 minutes, you'll be like, man, the juice starts to flow. Then you will eventually get a little bit better. So you can do like little things like that, or you can set up your work environment such that it's rewarding for you. So for example, whenever I need to write like a creative project or big doc, my reward to myself is usually like instrumental music playing in the background. I'm drinking my oats latte. So then I'm getting into this mindset of like, I'm enjoying this like creative pursuit. So I set up my environment clean and tidy such that it feels like, I'm doing something, and I'm ready to be productive. So you can create design your environment such that it motivates you to do what you need to do. But setting intention and then being conscious about it, prioritization, very important.
Yeah. So many good practices to follow. And what I really like about all of these is that they're all very easy to implement, right? It's not just about, there's this yam that I got, from Shyvee, but then I don't think it's really going to help me because it's so difficult to start. I think that's not going to be the case here. All of these are pretty much implementable every little day. And like when you work on your next project on this weekend, you can just try about implementing some of this. And I really like the hack yourself and do it, because that's often what I do as well. I start at it and I'm like, okay, just one step to start. Let's just start it and then continue for like 2-3 minutes and then like, let's just go with the flow. And often I've surprised myself by actually completing the things that I've kept on the way for such a long time, thinking that, oh my God, those are like stuff that I don't want to do. So totally actionable stuff. So thank you so much for sharing, Shiv. And I think, some of these also not just needs to be done one-off, I guess, because all of these are like practices that you set for yourself. It's, I think the book is Atomic Habits, so where some of these little techniques in terms of like tricking yourself into getting more productive every single day is what you need to do without just doing them one-off, but get it more like a practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one last question before we try to wrap up today's conversation is, I know how much you love, curating and creating content and helping people out there with all the knowledge that you share. So I've also seen your public repository, by the way, which is like super specific, so many links. I'm going to put that into the description of the video as well. What do you look forward to in the coming days to create? And do you have like new things to work on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always noodle on ideas, but then I would reprioritize it again. So like, is that the right leverage and ROI? I think definitely continue to build PM learning series, potentially maybe organize some community meetup, either virtually or outside, to learn more, to hear from people. I think that's very, very important. I would like to double down on that. I'm also doing some research to help encourage more people to share stuff on LinkedIn. So I think that will keep me busy as I embark on this new journey. There are some other projects I've been thinking about, like, should I create a cohort course? Because Maven have reached out to me a few times. I've done it before that I enjoy, or maybe start writing a book or something. But I think what I learned is that, there's a project that can keep me busy right now and potentially give a short-term boost of gratification. And I've done a number of those throughout my career. But right now, I really wanted to learn is to connect with the right people, with the right leader, to continue to level up my product career, to perfect my craft. Through learning from all of this career, this great thought leader, as well as putting them into practice. I think I want to play the long game, meaning that in the near term, I try to minimize all this like smaller little projects that I can do here and there, but focus on the bigger project I can do, let's say in 3 years or something. So I'm trying to just like more and more moving into that long-term thinking game versus like, oh, I can build a course on, I don't know, interviewing for PM or something. I have all the resource. I can very easily build that up. But I think I'm going to thinking more long-term of like, does that lead to where I want to go in 5 to 7 years? Because every project I say yes to now is going to mean something is going to have to be saying no. So I want to make sure I make the right prioritization. But again, I see building my career, building my audience, building my brand on LinkedIn a long-term pursuit. So I didn't want to just looking at the near-term things that I could do.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a very interesting way to look at what do you want to work on currently, not just saying yes for the momentary time being list of these projects, but looking at the long term and the longer game, like you said. Totally with you on that, because I think somewhere a lot of things that we work on today would like connecting back the dots would tie into a lot of things that we said no to, which later on we would think like, oh, I wish I had done that. It's because we hastily said yes to a lot of things now. So planning it out for the longer term is going to help us with a more stable way of looking at things, and doing a lot of self-reflection on what really matters to us is definitely going to take us forward. So that's a great way to look at it. And all the best, Shyvee. I think I had so much fun talking to you today, discussing all about the creator stuff, going deep into the edtech stuff, and also, like a PM to PM talk on what's really the craft like, what's the day-to-day stuff like, and so many good things that we discussed today. So I hope the listeners also had a lot of takeaways from you, and I hope they would reach out to you if they have more questions on building their product journey. So yeah, thank you so much once again.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure to be here. I think you did a fantastic job interviewing, asking really good questions, offering your perspective as well. So I think listeners should learn a lot from you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.